For 58 years, I've hosted Thanksgiving dinner for the Thompson family. My children, their spouses, my grandchildren, even great-grandchildren now, all gathered around my table, eating my turkey, smiling my smiles. They think I'm just the old woman now, the one who built the empire but has grown soft. They think I don't hear their whispers in the hallway, their late-night calls, their secret meetings. This year, my eldest son and daughter plan to vote me out as chairwoman of Thompson Industries. They thought I'd be devastated. They thought I'd go quietly. They forgot who taught them everything they know about strategy. They forgot that I've been playing this game since before they were born, and they had no idea I've been waiting for this moment for 30 years. Hello, welcome to Hurt Stories. My name is Alina Thompson. I am 78 years old, and for 58 of those years, I have hosted Thanksgiving dinner for my family. It began modestly, just me, my late husband Richard, and our 2 small children in our tiny walk-up apartment in Boston. I cooked the turkey in a borrowed roasting pan. Richard carved with a knife that had seen better days. The children fought over the wishbone, and my daughter Margaret cried when she lost. Simple, sweet, innocent. I had no idea, that first Thanksgiving, that I was beginning a tradition that would span 6 decades and outlast my husband, my siblings, and most of my friends. I had no idea that this dinner would become the annual gathering of an empire. I certainly had no idea that one day, my own children would use this sacred family ritual to try to destroy me. But let me not get ahead of myself. The company, Thompson Industries, started as a small textile business Richard inherited from his father. A modest operation, 2 warehouses, a handful of employees. Richard was a good man, kind and steady, but he lacked vision. He was content to maintain, to preserve, to keep things as they were. I was not. I saw the potential. I saw how we could expand, diversify, grow. I pushed Richard to take risks, to enter new markets, to think bigger. He resisted at first. He was cautious by nature, but I was persistent. I am persistent. It's perhaps my greatest flaw and my greatest strength. By the time Richard died 20 years ago, Thompson Industries was no longer a small textile business. It was a multinational conglomerate with holdings in manufacturing, technology, real estate, and finance. We had offices in a dozen countries, thousands of employees, and annual revenues in the billions. And I was the chairwoman. Not because Richard left it to me, he left the company to our children equally, as was his way, but because I had built it, I had earned it, and I was not about to let anyone take it from me. So I bought them out. One by one, I purchased my children's shares, using money I'd saved and invested over decades. By the time the dust settled, I controlled 60% of Thompson Industries. My children controlled the rest. They were furious, of course. They'd expected to inherit everything without lifting a finger. But I didn't care. The company was mine. And Thanksgiving became complicated. More children arrived. We had 3 more after the first 2, though one, my youngest son Charles, died in a boating accident years ago. Then the children married and brought spouses. Then the grandchildren came, and then the great-grandchildren. What started as a table for 4 became a table for 30, then 40, then more. We moved from the apartment to a house, then to a larger house, then to the estate where I live now, a 100-acre property with a main house that can seat 50 for dinner. Every year the Thompson clan gathers. Every year I cook the turkey. Well, I supervise the cooking now. I'm not as young as I used to be. Every year we sit around this table and we pretend to be a family. But we're not a family. Not really. We're a corporation with blood ties. A business arrangement disguised as a family. And this year, the shareholders decided they wanted a new CEO. I started noticing the whispers about 8 months ago. Little things at first. My eldest son, William, taking calls in the garden where he thought I couldn't see him. But I have cameras everywhere. My daughter Margaret having lunch with the company's outside counsel, without telling me, without it appearing on any official calendar. My younger children, Philip and Charlotte, being unusually quiet at family gatherings, exchanging glances I wasn't meant to see, texting under the table like teenagers. I've been in business for 60 years. I've survived hostile takeovers, boardroom coups, government investigations, and more backstabbing than most people could imagine. I know what conspiracy looks like. I can smell it the way a hunter smells prey. So I started watching and listening and learning. I have resources my children don't know about. Staff who report to me directly, not through the usual channels. Technology they think I'm too old to understand. Friends in places they'd never think to look. I knew about their meetings before they scheduled them. I knew about their plans before they'd fully formed them. William, my eldest, has always felt entitled to the company. He's 62 now, and he's been waiting for me to die or retire for 4 decades. He thinks I don't know about the meetings he's had with private equity firms, the offers he's fielded, the plans he's made to sell the company the moment I'm gone. Margaret, my second, is smarter than William but just as hungry. She's the CFO of Thompson Industries, a position I gave her to keep her close, to watch her, to know her moves before she makes them. She thinks I don't know about the spreadsheets she's been hiding, the numbers she's been cooking, the allies she's been courting on the board. Philip and Charlotte, the younger two, are less ambitious but easily led. They've been promised positions, money, power, if they play along with William and Margaret's plan. Philip has always been weak, easily manipulated. Charlotte has always been desperate for approval, willing to do anything to be included. And the spouses, don't get me started on the spouses. Every single one of them has their own agenda, their own debts, their own secrets. I know them all. I've made it my business to know. I have files on every single one, financial records, private communications, evidence of affairs and indiscretions and petty crimes. They think they're clever. They think I'm just the old woman in the corner, dozing off after dinner. They have no idea. By August, I had the full picture. William and Margaret had been planning this for over a year. The goal: vote me out as chairwoman at the annual shareholders meeting, which conveniently falls the week after Thanksgiving. They needed a majority of the board, which, in our family, means a majority of the voting shares. I control 40% of the shares. William has 25%, Margaret has 20%, and the remaining 15% are split between Philip, Charlotte, a few minor shareholders, and a trust I set up years ago for my late son Charles's children. A trust that I control. If William and Margaret could convince Philip and Charlotte to side with them, they'd have 60%. They'd win. They'd control the board. They'd push me out. So they set about wooing the younger too. Promises of promotions, of board seats, of money. Philip is easily bought. He's always had expensive taste and not enough income to match. He's been living beyond his means for years, and Margaret has been quietly covering his debts, creating a dependency she could exploit. Charlotte is more complicated, but her husband Derek has gambling debts that Margaret discovered. Hundreds of thousands of dollars owed to dangerous people. Margaret offered to make them disappear in exchange for Charlotte's loyalty. By October, the alliance was sealed. William, Margaret, Philip, and Charlotte all united against me, all planning to vote me out at Thanksgiving dinner, to humiliate me in front of the whole family, to take what I'd built and call it their own. They thought I didn't know. They thought I was oblivious, senile, past my prime. They held their meetings at William's house, sent encrypted emails, used code words they thought I couldn't decipher. I knew everything. Every conversation, every plan, every betrayal. I had sources everywhere, staff who reported to me, friends who kept me informed, technology they didn't know I had. I let them think they were clever. I let them think they were winning. Because I had a plan of my own. A plan I'd been preparing for 30 years. You see, this wasn't the first time my children had tried to betray me. 30 years ago, when Richard was still alive, William and Margaret attempted a similar coup. They were younger then, less sophisticated, easier to stop. Richard handled it. He threatened to cut them out of the will entirely, and they backed down. But I never forgot. I never forgave. And I spent the next 3 decades preparing for the moment when they'd try again. First, I called my lawyer. His name is Arthur Sterling, and he's been with me for 40 years. He's more loyal than any of my children. I made sure of that. I've paid him handsomely, kept his secrets, made him a wealthy man. He would never betray me. I told him what was coming. He wasn't surprised. He'd seen it before in other families, other companies. He helped me prepare the documents I would need. Legal documents, ironclad and unassailable, that would protect my control of the company no matter what my children tried. Second, I called my accountant. There are things my children don't know about the company, things I've kept hidden for decades. Shell companies, offshore accounts, contingency funds. Not illegal, I'm too smart for that and too careful, but strategically placed. Resources they don't know exist, accounts they can't touch, money that answers only to me. I've been building these reserves for 30 years, siphoning small amounts from the company's profits, investing them wisely, growing them quietly. By now, the total is in the hundreds of millions, enough to fund a war, enough to destroy anyone who tried to take what's mine. Third, I called my security chief. His name is Marcus Webb, and he's former CIA. He's been with me for 15 years, and he's the most paranoid man I've ever met, which is exactly why I hired him. I asked him to monitor certain communications, to be present at the dinner, to be ready for anything. He told me he'd been monitoring for months. He had recordings, transcripts, photographs, evidence of everything my children had planned. And fourth, I did something I never thought I'd do. I called my sister Agnes. Agnes and I haven't spoken in 35 years. We had a falling out over the company. She wanted control, I wouldn't give it. She was older than me, and she believed the company should have gone to her when our father died. But our father knew something Agnes didn't. She was reckless, impulsive, incapable of the long-term thinking required to run an empire. So he left it to me. Agnes never forgave him. She never forgave me. She left, started her own business, built it into a modest success. We've been estranged ever since. But Agnes knows things. Things about our family, about our history, about the children when they were young. Things that might be useful. I called her. I told her what was happening. She listened. And then she said something that chilled me to the bone. She said, "Eleanor, this isn't the first time they've tried this. They approached me 5 years ago, wanted my help, my shares, my support. They thought I still hated you enough to help them destroy you." I said, "And what did you tell them?" She said, "I told them no, but I kept the recordings." Recordings? My children had tried to recruit their own aunt against me, and she'd recorded them. Every conversation, every threat, every promise. She'd been waiting for the right moment to use them. I asked her why. Why had she said no? Why had she kept the recordings? She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Because you're still my sister, Eleanor. Because family is family. Because whatever happened between us, I would never help someone destroy what our father built." I cried. I don't cry often. I can count on one hand the number of times I've cried as an adult. But I cried then. I asked her to come to Thanksgiving. She said she would. Thanksgiving morning dawned cold and clear. I woke early, as I always do, and stood at my bedroom window watching the sun rise over the estate. My estate, my land, my life's work. The first to arrive were Philip and his wife, Vanessa. They drove up in a car that cost more than most people's houses. A gift from Margaret, I later learned, part of the bribery. Philip kissed my cheek, handed me a bottle of expensive wine, made small talk about the drive. Vanessa smiled her tight smile and said nothing. I saw her eyes darting around the room, cataloging, calculating. She's the dangerous one in that pair. Next came Charlotte and her husband, Derek. Charlotte looked nervous, avoiding my eyes, fidgeting with her jewelry. Derek looked smug, like he already knew how the day would end. Poor Derek. He has no idea what's coming. Margaret arrived with her family, her husband Robert and their 3 children, all grown now, all as ambitious and cold as their mother. She hugged me warmly, asked about my health, complimented the decorations. Margaret has always been the best actress. She should have gone into theater instead of finance. William was last, as always. He likes to make an entrance. He came alone. His wife left him years ago, and I don't blame her. She was a good woman, and he treated her terribly. He kissed my cheek, squeezed my shoulder, said, "Ready for another wonderful Thanksgiving, Mother." I smiled and said, "Always, William, always." We gathered in the living room for cocktails. The chatter was normal, sports, politics, gossip, but underneath I could feel the tension, the glances, the whispered conversations, the anticipation. They were waiting for dinner, waiting for the moment when they would spring their trap. So was I. Dinner was served at 6 o'clock, as it always is. The dining room looked beautiful, candles, flowers, the good china that's been in our family for 5 generations. I sat at the head of the table, as I always do. William sat to my right, Margaret to my left. The others arranged themselves according to the place cards I'd set. They didn't notice that the place cards weren't random. I'd arranged them strategically, allies near me, enemies where I could watch them, potential defectors where I could influence them. Every seat was a chess move. Every position had been calculated months in advance. The first course was served. Butternut squash soup, a family recipe. We ate and made small talk. The second course, salad with pomegranate seeds and candied walnuts. More small talk. The tension was building. I could feel it. They were waiting for the main course. Waiting for the moment when the turkey would be carved and the real business would begin. I carved the turkey myself, as I always do. It's a tradition. The matriarch carves. William offered to help, as he always does. I declined, as I always do. No one noticed anything unusual. We ate. We complimented the food. We talked about the children, the grandchildren, the great-grandchildren. Normal, safe, boring. Then, as the pumpkin pie was being served, William cleared his throat. He said, "Mother, there's something we need to discuss." I looked at William. I smiled. I said, "Of course, dear, what is it?" He glanced at Margaret. She nodded. He took a breath and said, "Mother, we've been talking, all of us, and we've come to a decision. It's time for you to step down as chairwoman of Thompson Industries." The table went silent. Every eye was on me. I could hear my own heartbeat, slow and steady like a drum. I said, "I see, and why would I do that?" Margaret jumped in. "Mother, you're 78 years old. You've done amazing things, built an incredible company. But it's time for new leadership, fresh ideas, a new generation." I said, "And by new generation, you mean you and William?" William said, "We have a plan, Mother, a vision for the future. Philip and Charlotte support us. We have the votes. We're not asking you to step down, we're telling you. At the shareholders' meeting next week, we'll be voting you out. We wanted you to hear it from us first." I looked around the table. Philip wouldn't meet my eyes. Charlotte was studying her plate like it held the secrets of the universe. Their spouses looked smug, triumphant, like they'd already won. I said, "I see, and you think this is how it's going to happen?" Margaret said, "Mother, don't make this harder than it needs to be. You've had a good run. Retire gracefully. Enjoy your grandchildren. Leave the business to us." I set down my fork. I folded my hands on the table, and I said, "Margaret, dear, do you remember what I taught you about business? About strategy?" She blinked. "What?" I said, "I taught you that the most important thing in any negotiation is information. Knowing what the other side knows. Knowing what they don't know." William said, "What are you talking about?" I smiled. I said, "I'm talking about the fact that I've known about your little conspiracy for 8 months. I'm talking about the recordings my sister made when you approached her 5 years ago. I'm talking about the documents I have that will destroy every single one of you if you try to take my company." The looks on their faces, I'll never forget them. I nodded to Marcus, my security chief, who had been standing discreetly by the door. He pressed a button on a remote. A screen descended from the ceiling, and a projector flickered to life. On the screen appeared a video. William and Margaret meeting with my sister Agnes 5 years ago, trying to recruit her to their side. Their voices were clear, their words unmistakable. "We need your shares. We need your support. Together we can push her out." William went pale. Margaret's mouth opened, but nothing came out. I said, "That's not all." I pressed another button. Financial documents appeared on the screen. Spreadsheets showing the money William had been siphoning from the company for years. The accounts Margaret had been hiding. The debts Philip had accumulated, hundreds of thousands of dollars, hidden from his wife, from the family, from everyone. The gambling losses Charlotte's husband Derek had covered up using company funds. I said, "I know everything. Every secret, every lie, every betrayal. I've known for years. I've been waiting for this moment." William stood up, his chair scraping against the floor, his face red with fury. "You can't do this. You can't blackmail us. We have rights. We have shares. We'll take you to court." I said, "Sit down, William." He didn't sit. I nodded to Marcus, who stepped forward from the shadows. Marcus is 6'4" and looks like he could break a man in half with his bare hands. William looked at him, then at me, then slowly, reluctantly, sat down. I said, "Now let me tell you how this is going to work. And let me be clear, you have no choices here. You have no options. You have no power. I've been planning for this moment for 30 years. Every contingency, every escape route, every possible move you might make, I've already anticipated it and neutralized it." I paused, letting the silence stretch. "You thought you were the ones springing a trap, but you've been inside my trap from the very beginning. Every conversation you had, every email you sent, every plan you made, I knew about it. I have recordings, transcripts, copies. I have evidence of crimes you didn't even know you were committing." I looked around the table at my children, my greedy, scheming, disappointing children, and I felt nothing. No love, no hate, just the cold satisfaction of victory. I said, "Here are the terms. First, there will be no vote at the shareholders' meeting. You will all publicly support my continued leadership. Any attempt to oppose me will result in these documents being released to the press, the authorities, and every business partner we have. You will be ruined, not metaphorically, literally. You will lose everything. Second, William, you will resign from the board immediately. You'll retain your shares, but you'll have no operational role. You're 62 years old. It's time to retire. You'll also repay every penny you siphoned from the company with interest within 6 months. If you don't, I'll turn the evidence over to the IRS. You'll spend your retirement in federal prison." William started to protest. I raised my hand. He stopped. "Third, Margaret, you will remain as CFO, but you'll report directly to me. Every financial decision will come through my office. Any deviation from this will result in the immediate release of your secret accounts to the appropriate authorities. You'll also surrender your bonus for the next 5 years. Consider it a lesson in loyalty." Margaret's face was ashen. She nodded. "Fourth, Philip and Charlotte, you'll keep your positions, but your salaries will be reduced by half until your debts are paid. Your spouses will have no further involvement in company matters. If I see either of them in the office again, there will be consequences. Philip, you'll enter a debt management program of my choosing. Charlotte, Derek will attend Gamblers Anonymous twice a week, and I will receive proof of his attendance." Philip's wife started to speak. I looked at her. She stopped. "Finally, all of you will sign new agreements. Agreements that give me controlling interest in perpetuity. Agreements that ensure none of you can ever try this again. Agreements that make any future attempt at betrayal financially ruinous for everyone involved. You'll sign them tonight before you leave this house." I paused, letting it sink in. "Or you can refuse, and I can destroy you. Your choice, but I want to be very clear about something. This isn't a negotiation. This isn't a compromise. This is me telling you how the rest of your lives are going to work. You can accept it gracefully, or you can accept it after I've taken everything you have. Those are the only 2 options." One by one, they signed. William was last. He looked at me with something like hatred as he put his pen to the paper. I met his gaze calmly. Hatred I can handle. Hatred is honest. Hatred I can use. When it was done, I dismissed them. They filed out of the dining room like mourners at a funeral, which, in a way, they were. The funeral of their ambitions, the death of their dreams. Only Margaret lingered. She stood by the door, her hand on the frame, and looked back at me. Her eyes were wet, but she wasn't crying. Margaret doesn't cry. She's too proud. She said, "Mother, did you ever love us? Or were we always just assets?" I looked at my daughter, my ambitious, calculating, brilliant daughter, and for a moment I felt something. Not love exactly, something older, something almost forgotten, something that might have been grief. I said, "I loved you when you were children. Before you learned to scheme, before you learned to want what was mine, before you became strangers. I loved you then. I still love you now. But love doesn't mean letting you destroy what I built. Love doesn't mean letting you take what isn't yours." She said, "You could have shared. You could have let us in. You could have treated us like partners instead of threats." I said, "I tried. Years ago, you rejected every offer. You wanted control, not partnership. You wanted my power, not my love. Don't blame me for the choices you made." She nodded slowly. She said, "What happens now to us, to this family?" I said, "That's up to you. I've given you a chance to rebuild, to prove yourselves, to earn back what you threw away. What you do with that chance is your choice." She left without another word. I sat alone at the empty table, surrounded by the remains of Thanksgiving dinner. The candles had burned low. The wine glasses were stained. The turkey was just bones. The pumpkin pie sat uneaten. My sister Agnes came in. She'd watched the whole thing from the library, through a hidden camera I'd installed years ago. She sat down next to me and poured herself a glass of wine, the good stuff, a burgundy I'd been saving for a special occasion. She said, "You won." I said, "Did I?" She looked at me. "You kept your company, you stopped their coup, you won." I said, "I lost my children. I lost any chance of ever having a real family. Is that winning?" Agnes was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Alina, you lost your children the moment you made them compete for your approval. The moment you turned the company into a prize. The moment you valued power over connection. This didn't start tonight. It didn't start 5 years ago. It started decades ago when you chose the business over them." I wanted to argue. I wanted to tell her she was wrong, but I couldn't, because she was right. I said, "What do I do now?" She said, "You keep going. You're the matriarch. That's what matriarchs do. But maybe you try to find a way back to them, not as their boss, as their mother, as the woman who raised them, who loved them, who sacrificed for them. Maybe you remind them of who you were before you became this." I nodded. I didn't know if it was possible. The wounds were deep, the betrayals raw, the history long and painful. But I knew I had to try. Not for the company was safe. For them. For me. For whatever was left of our family. I called William the next day. He didn't answer. I left a message. "William, I'm not calling about the company. I'm calling about dinner, just the two of us. Like we used to. Let me know." He called back 3 days later. He said yes. We had dinner at a small restaurant, neutral ground. We didn't talk about the business. We talked about his childhood, his father, his memories. He cried. I almost did. It wasn't much, but it was a start. The next Thanksgiving was different. Not perfect, nothing is perfect, but different. The tension was still there, the wounds still raw, but there was something else too, something that felt almost like hope. William came early and helped me set the table. Margaret brought a pie, her first attempt at cooking, and it showed, but I ate every bite. Philip and Charlotte arrived together without their spouses. I'd made that a condition. The children and grandchildren were louder than ever, filling the house with noise and chaos and life. After dinner, we gathered in the living room. No one mentioned the company. No one mentioned the vote. No one mentioned the betrayal. Instead, we told stories. Old stories. Stories about Richard, about the early days, about the time William fell into the pond and Margaret pushed him, about the Christmas Philip set the tree on fire. We laughed. We cried. We remembered. When everyone had gone home, I sat alone in the quiet, thinking about what had happened, about what I'd done, about what I'd lost and what I'd gained. I thought about the woman I used to be, the young mother, the ambitious entrepreneur, the wife who loved her husband. I thought about the woman I'd become, the matriarch, the strategist, the queen. I didn't know if I'd made the right choices. I didn't know if there was a way to have both, power and family, control and love, empire and connection. But I knew I was going to try. Because I'm Alina Thompson. I'm the matriarch. I don't give up on anything, not my company, not my family, not my second chances. And I've learned that winning isn't always about destroying your enemies. Sometimes, winning is about finding a way to bring them home. Thanks for listening. If you want to hear more story like this, please like the video and subscribe the channel. Hit the bell icon to get notified.